All right, let's jump right into this explainer and reframe exactly how we view, experience, and ultimately support autistic meltdowns. For decades, these intense episodes have been misunderstood, mislabeled, and honestly mishandled by society. But today, we're looking directly at the clinical research, the biological triggers, and most importantly, the actual lived experiences of autistic individuals. We really want to figure out what is literally happening beneath the surface and how we can move past simple empathy and step into meaningful action. To really grasp this, we need to start from the inside out. Listen to these powerful words from autistic advocate Sunny Hallett. They describe the physical buildup of a meltdown as feeling like my bones have been vibrating, a background hum like high-voltage pylons. Just imagine that for a second. The energy is so exhausting, it leaves them feeling like they might literally rip apart. This isn't just someone having a bad day, right? This is a profound, whole-body physiological state of emergency. So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the anatomy of overload, clarify the massive difference between meltdowns and tantrums, and then walk step by step through the rumbling, crisis, and recovery stages. Finally, we'll wrap up by looking at how to build a rock-solid support system. Okay, Section 1, the anatomy of overload. Let's look at how capacity works. Meltdowns rarely just happen out of nowhere. They are the direct result of a nervous system that is completely maxed out. To understand this overload, look at this quote. It brilliantly illustrates the intense sensory and informational overwhelm an autistic person faces when their brain's processing capacity is stretched to its absolute limit. In this state, executive functions literally begin to fail. As Sunny Hallett points out, just trying to string a sentence together or answer a simple question feels like trying to grab fish with your bare hands. Every single new demand, every bright light, every sudden noise, it all just adds to this crushing internal weight. Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is how Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory actually validates this entire experience as a hardwired involuntary neurological response, not a behavioral choice. Published in the Asian Journal of Interdisciplinary Research, this framework explains that when an autistic individual goes through sensory or emotional trauma, their autonomic nervous system just entirely bypasses conscious thought. So the key takeaway here is this stark contrast between the ventral vagal system and the dorsal vagal system. It shows us how our nervous system will literally power itself down under threat. When we feel safe, our ventral vagal system is engaged, right? We can be social, we can learn. But when the environment gets too overwhelming, the body flips into fight or fight. Or even worse, it triggers the dorsal vagal pathway. That results in complete immobilization and dissociation. The person isn't choosing to disconnect. Their nervous system is literally just trying to save them from a perceived threat. Moving on to Section 2, meltdowns versus tantrums. We have got to shatter the most pervasive and honestly harmful myth surrounding autism, which is confusing a neurological crisis with bad behavior. This clear juxtaposition proves that meltdowns are involuntary, self-limiting crises. They're utterly distinct from the goal-oriented nature of a tantrum. Think about it. If a child screams because they want a toy, and they stop the exact second you hand it to them, well, that's a tantrum. A meltdown has absolutely no end goal. Even if you completely remove the trigger or give them what they want, the meltdown still has to physically run its course because the nervous system has already tipped over the edge. I love this quote from an autism advocate and mother because it perfectly captures the cognitive shift and compassion we need to make. When we look at someone in distress and realize they're trapped in an involuntary neurological response, it completely changes our reaction from frustration to protective care. We stop trying to discipline them, and we start trying to help them regulate. All right, Section 3, Stage 1, the rumbling. Let's talk about early warning signs. So let's look at the actual chronological cycle of a meltdown. Medical and behavioral experts agree that understanding this predictable 3-stage cycle gives us a hugely actionable framework. Knowing the timeline, rumbling, rage, and recovery is hands down the best way to proactively manage these events. You've really got to keep a close eye on these specific warning signs and environmental triggers, because catching them early, that's the secret to prevention. During this rumbling stage, someone might start pacing, rocking, maybe intensely biting their nails. They might cover their ears or suddenly just stop speaking altogether. This is literally the nervous system throwing up warning flares, signaling that the cognitive load is getting way too heavy. This often happens because of a sudden schedule change or extreme sensory input. If you spot those signs, you can use some pretty subtle de-escalation tactics to diffuse the situation before it peaks. The Organization for Autism Research suggests something called proximity control, which is really just calmly standing nearby as a supportive presence, without demanding any interaction. Or there's antiseptic bouncing, where you casually ask them to run an errand in a quieter room. It organically gets them out of the stressful environment without it feeling like a punishment. Section 4, Stage 2, the crisis. Now, if that rumbling phase isn't diffused, we enter the disinhibited secondary phase, the crisis. And we usually associate meltdowns with explosive actions, right? Yelling, crying, flailing as the body tries to expel all that vibrating energy. But it is equally common for an autistic individual to involuntarily implode. Autistic advocate Bridget Rankowski points out that her meltdowns are actually implosive. The world gets too loud, so she sits down, covers her ears, and completely loses the ability to even form words to ask for help. Both of these reactions are equally distressing crisis states. If things do reach this crisis point, the advice here is direct and it's absolutely crucial. Remove hazards, dim the lights, and provide space without adding any complex conversational pressure. Guys, this is not a teachable moment. Do not ask them to explain what's wrong. You literally need to strip away all sensory input and social demands. If you absolutely must speak, use a super quiet, reassuring tone, or just stay totally silent if talking is adding to their overload. Your one and only job right now is physical safety. Section 5, Stage 3, the recovery, the aftermath. Now, the episode absolutely does not end just because the immediate crisis has peaked. The aftermath takes immense care. You have to acknowledge that their nervous system is totally drained. They are going to be physically exhausted and incapable of immediate learning or processing. It's like running a marathon you didn't even sign up for. The person might be sullen, withdrawn, or even deny what just happened. Their senses are going to be incredibly raw, and honestly, they'll probably need deep, uninterrupted sleep just to reboot their depleted systems. And for our autistic viewers tuning in, this is absolutely vital. You have to take ownership of your self-care without carrying the lingering guilt of an involuntary neurological reaction. Psychology Today highlights that because no one likes losing control, there is often this immense wave of shame following a meltdown. But please remember, your brain is just wired to process the world differently. This was a response to an overwhelming environment. It was not a personal failure. Give yourself some grace as you recover. A huge part of this recovery is having what we call a home base. This should be a dedicated, safe space where the individual can do low-stress, self-calming things, like maybe using a weighted blanket with zero external expectations. And to be clear, this is not a timeout corner. It shouldn't be associated with discipline at all. It's a sanctuary, a dim room where they can stim freely, listen to chill music, or literally just sit in complete silence until the edges of the world stop feeling so fuzzy. All right, our final section, Section 6, Building a Support System. So how can allies, parents, and partners proactively manage this cycle moving forward? Well, it's all about looking for patterns and collaboratively building a sensory toolbox. Doing this can drastically reduce how often meltdowns happen and how intense they get. Once the person is fully recovered and feeling totally neutral, sit down and work together to figure out what the triggers were. Was it a flickering light? A last-minute change of plans? Equip them with noise-canceling headphones, stick to predictable routines, and always give advance warning if something on the schedule is going to change. And look, supporting someone through a meltdown, it can be really intense and exhausting. So remember to give yourself the same compassion you extend to them. Witnessing someone you care about in crisis is tough. You might feel totally helpless or super frustrated. When that happens, just take a deep breath. Try to shift your mindset away from trying to forcefully stop the meltdown and move toward trying to understand and accommodate it. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. It really challenges us all to step up and create a society that actively accommodates and embraces neurodiversity. Meltdowns are a harsh reality of navigating a world that was strictly built for neurotypical sensory levels. But if we actually commit to understanding the deep, neurological reality of these episodes, we can start building spaces, relationships, and communities where everyone feels safe, regulated, and truly understood. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.